Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Johanna. I'm from the UN Innovation Network, and we are thrilled to see so many of you joining us for the Human-Centered Design workshop as part of the Build Back Better Challenge. I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with the challenge yet. I hope you are, because you registered for this and keen to innovate, but just in case, a refresher might be helpful. The Build Back Better Challenge was launched last week by an alliance of entities, individuals, departments from across the UN, from various networks like DCO, UNSSE, the New Work Initiative at the UN headquarters, from Young UN, Unlock, OICT. So a really wide range of colleagues all contributing to put together this crowdsourcing challenge, where we are hoping to find new solutions and existing projects that might help to address some of the challenges that we have seen arise as part of the COVID-19 outbreak, that will help the UN position itself to respond better to future crises and become a more lean, agile, collaborative, human-centered organization. So it's a really interesting challenge. We invite all of you to be part of it. It is hosted at the Unite Ideas platform. You can see the address below. And this workshop is targeting those who would like to submit ideas, but aren't really sure how to go about it, who have an existing project, but need a little bit of help refining it. So we will be bringing you lots of human-centered design techniques, which are the bread and butter of every innovator. And I'm really thrilled today to be joined by my new colleague, Christoph, who has just joined the UN Innovation Network. So you're going to be seeing more of him. Christoph, so great to have you. Do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, I just had to unmute. Thank you so much for this introduction, Johanna. A very warm welcome to everyone. I'm indeed Christoph. I just joined the UN Innovation Network, specifically to support here with this Build Back Better Challenge. Indeed, I have a background in innovation in the private sector, but also worked with different UN entities in the space of innovation. And I'm very much looking forward to give you a very brief introduction to some of the highlights of human-centered design today. So I would say, let's dive right into it. And as human-centered design is all about human interaction, I would say, let's start right away with a poll and actually engage with you. And let's get to know each other a little bit. And if we could please launch the poll here. Exactly. Please tell us, why are you good at realizing new ideas? So what type of innovator are you? Please let us know. You should see the poll now on your screen.
Christoph, while people are voting, what type of innovator are you?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a very tricky question. Thank you. Well, I love several aspects. It's very hard to say actually which one is good, but probably if I'm strong at something, I'm probably at point number 2, right? I'm a doer and I really love creating solutions very quickly. But of course, in combination with also 1 and talking to the users. And I'm also very pleased to see that we actually have in our audience, people with a very strong human and people focus, right? We have people who love to spend time with the users to find this best solution, together with a lot of votes also for enjoying with people and building the right alliances to get an innovation off the ground. So I'm very pleased to see that. And we also have a couple of doers. So I think that's a really great mix of innovators that we have right here. And I'm also very pleased to see that actually no one said that unfortunately, I don't have the time or don't have the chance to work with new ideas very often. So excellent. Then thank you very much for your input. I'm very pleased to see that we have such a mixed group of innovators here today in our call. And let's get going and let's start talking about human-centered design. You know, I've labeled here a little post-it. We're working online, but you've probably seen some human-centered design interventions around you, maybe different offices. These are typically these workshops where you have a lot of different post-its on the wall. And today we'll dive a little bit into what it is in more detail. So essentially, what is human-centered design? It's a problem-solving approach, right? But there are many different problem-solving approaches out there. And human-centered design is a problem-solving approach with a twist. It's actually a solution-finding approach together with the user, right? It's less so that you're trying to find the solution to a problem by yourself, but you try to find a solution together with the user. And very often under imperfect information, right? It's very often like a high degree of uncertainty, a rather fuzzy process, and HCD helps you to actually navigate that, to find a very good solution together with the user. And therefore today, we only have a little bit less than an hour, and so it's going to be very compressed. I do have to warn you, we will move rather fast, and it will be quite dense. To give you a brief intro to the human-centered design basics, we have selected a few tools for you today that you might want to have a look at in the coming 2 weeks to be able to submit a great idea to the Build Back Better challenge. And we have also a little gift for you in the end. For those of you who don't have a back-to-back meeting coming up straight after this call, we can extend optionally for 30 more minutes in exchange, have a Q&A, maybe do a little exercise together. But we'll see that after the first hour, who of you still wants to stay on for 30 extra minutes. So then let's have another look at you and pull up our next poll. When you start to work on a new idea, what do you usually do first? Do you dive straight into the perfect solution? And please give us your responses again in the poll. Do you start writing a concept note? Do you start to spend time with the users and the beneficiaries? All right. I think a lot of people are giving the desirable answer for an HCD workshop that is spent time with the users and the beneficiaries.
I'll leave it open for 5 more seconds. Make your selection now. 3, 2, 1, last chance. And here are the results for everyone to see.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Johanna. So, as mentioned, we have if there was a right or a wrong, we have for a human-centered design workshop at least, almost 70% of the audience gives us spend time with the users and beneficiaries. And of course, this is what we want to hear for an HCD workshop. So that's great news, great results. And so I hope that we're not preaching to the converted already. Then moving on, let's zoom out a little bit and have a look at HCD and innovation. So traditionally, over the past, let's say, decades probably, innovation has very often been driven from a business and or technology angle, right? So it has been very often driven by, you can imagine, the engineers, the innovators sitting in a lab, and they really have a great technical concept, right? And it's all about feasibility. There is something new, there's something great we can build, so let's actually build it because it's technically feasible. This can be beautiful solutions, but sometimes they would also fail then. And very often you see that actually also today happening in the space of IT, and great solutions are being programmed without actually doing sufficient user testing to make sure that whatever is being created from an engineering standpoint also resonates with the users. Same for viability. Of course, if you want for an innovation to be successful, it has to make economic sense. There has to be some certain business viability, right? But not everything that's profitable, theoretically, is actually also successful afterwards. And therefore, we actually would like to complement the feasibility and the viability aspects with the desirability aspect, right? And this is where human-centered design comes in. And human-centered design really helps you to uncover the needs and the aspirations of your users or beneficiaries to design a truly desirable product. And then in the end, innovation is successful if these 3 components actually meet: desirability, feasibility, and viability. You need all 3 of them to be successful, but you have to start at one of these points. And typically, if you start at desirability, it will guide you towards balancing out desirability with feasibility and viability to deliver a successful innovation. And then you can see a little hint at the bottom that I think, especially in our case, in the UN system, Yeah, you could also consider adding a fourth angle, which would be impact and sustainable development, because beyond the regular, this framework comes from the business world. Yeah, we also try to drive positive SDG impact, of course. All right, so let's please keep in mind there are these different angles. And if we want to practice HCD, we actually start with the desirability, because you neither need a deep technical knowledge to start from the desirability angle, nor do you need to have very, very deep pockets to be able to start from the viability angle. Having said that, HCD, there's a lot of jargon out there. And the HCD is a method, human-centered design is a process. And you might have heard from different sources, different buzzwords, right? It's a lot about empathy. You might have heard that. Some people use different words, sensing, understanding, an inspiration phase or an analysis phase in the beginning, right? And usually that's followed by a certain definition or creation of a point of view. And then once you have learned something, you would enter an ideation phase where you brainstorm and sketch and come up with a lot of different ideas. And then followed by, very often it's around prototyping, testing, proof of concept, piloting, validating, right? So there are a lot of different words and jargons out there that all essentially describe a similar flow. And no matter what jargon or what word you would like to use for the 5 or 6 different steps, what they all have in common is that they're very iterative, right? We mentioned earlier that HCD helps you to design good solutions together with the user under a level of uncertainty or under imperfect information. And because of this journey into the unknown, you have to work very, very iterative. And you have different iterative loops actually from different process steps back to the previous step, 2 steps backwards, 2 steps forwards. And this is then where actually good tooling comes in very handy, because it helps you to navigate this iterative process. And also probably to simplify things a little bit, because I've shared here with you a lot of different jargons and buzzwords from different HCD toolkits and methodologies, because there are several of them out there. In the end, if you have to simplify it, and yeah, we're here to teach HCD basics, in the beginning, what you try to do, you try to learn, you try to understand in a mostly qualitative way, what are the needs of your user? Then, of course, you have to make sense of everything you've learned, and then you enter an ideation process, right? And here, typically in HCD, it's all about quantity, creating many different ideas, which you can then test and do and really get out there and work together with the user. And then you repeat this process several times until you start to zoom in and home in on the actual solution that works, right? So to simplify some of this jargon, because we don't have the time to really take you step by step through some of the methods and process flows out there, just keep in mind, first you need to learn, mostly it's qualitative, then you enter basically an ideation roller coaster where you try to come up with as many different ideas as you can. And then you have to start to test and validate and do with your users to find out which of your ideas actually work. And then you repeat these steps. Okay, this is, please go ahead.
Thanks. A question, I wanted to pose a question to you from Raja. And they're wondering, why are we talking about users? Often the users are we ourselves. So mostly in the UN, it might be colleagues, especially if we're looking at internal problems. So we are the users. Why do we need to define a user on top of that?
Oh, thank you, Johanna. That's a very good question. I think in general, also if you are designing something for your colleagues, you have to be aware that you have one opinion. This is your opinion, right? And if you're a user yourself, this is a very good starting point, because it probably allows you to really relate towards your colleagues. But if you want to design something that is not only fit for your needs, but that is actually a good solution for all of your colleagues, you still have to engage with your colleagues and find out if they actually also like what you like, because you probably have a certain personality, you have a certain experience set, and even though you are, let's say, affected by the problem that you're trying to solve yourself, the solution that suits you might not suit everyone, right? So therefore, we would still suggest to actually talk to a couple of other users, and even if these are your colleagues, to make sure that your solution to the Build Back Better challenge is actually broad enough and stable enough and beautiful enough so that it has the potential to scale throughout the UN. And then especially with giving another answer to this question from the UN system angle, you're probably from one entity, right? And then within this one entity, you have one working culture and you have specific needs. And if you design something that's fit for purpose within your, let's say, smaller bubble, it doesn't necessarily mean that the solution is also fit for all other entities, right? And so therefore, we would advise to bake in scalability in your design process early on, and talk also to some other users in the broader UN family and see if they really have the same needs as you do. So I hope this was helpful. And let's have a look. We just talked a little bit about process, but process is only one end of the equation. We also have the other side of the equation, which would be the mindset. Yeah, and also here, I just took the liberty to extract some of the highlights of an HCD mindset that is summarized here in this slide. And you will also see that throughout the presentation, when we talk about toolings and tools, usually the slides have a blue color, and when we talk about mindset, we have slides in a pink color. So what's very important, right? If you're trying to navigate through this HCD process, you have to be very open-minded and curious. You have to be very explorative to really find out the new things and really listen closely to your users and empathize with them to really understand their needs, right? So it's not about how you project onto your users what they probably need based on your existing knowledge, but it's really about being curious, open-minded, and empathizing with your user so that you actually can fall in love with their problem, right? And not your solution that you probably already have in your mind because you're a great thinker. But you know, try to be in love with their problem, with the user's problem, rather than with the solution that you have in mind. No matter how beautiful the app is that you probably have in your mind, maybe this app is not the right answer to the problem that your users have. And in order to actually get to this point, you have to experiment. It's all about experimentation. It's not a clean process, A, B, C, D, but you have to, it's a fuzzy process where you have to test, fail, learn, and test again together with your users to find out what actually works. And here, there is one mindset element, show, don't tell. That means very often in our professional context, we're used to that we have to convince the people that we talk to that our idea is a good idea. We're trained in that, and that's very effective in certain circumstances. But when it comes to human-centered design, we actually want to learn about user behavior. So we should rather show them our solution rather than trying to convince them to see how they react to our solution. And then also HCD is all about collaboration. Because it's all about creativity, and if you have several brains in a room, you can actually co-create much better. You can come up with ideas that you couldn't come up with yourself. You can bounce off ideas and reflections about your users. So it's really all about collaboration and also working with your stakeholders. And I think we've seen this in the poll in the very beginning, that a lot of you are very good people persons. That are good at building alliances to get your ideas off the ground. And that's exactly that. So I'm not afraid about the collaboration piece here, but it's like really try to embrace the curiosity, the experimenting, and trying to fall in love with the problem of your users rather with your solution. That's really the key messages for a good HCD mindset. And try it out, you know, experiment, try it out in the next 2 weeks until you submit your final submissions to the Build Back Better challenge. Try to experiment with some of the mindset values that I've shared here with you. And let's have a closer look at tools. And before we get started, let's again get some feedback from your side. What tools are you already familiar with? I think we just launched a poll. Yes, it popped up on the screen. Let us know. I think you can give multiple answers here. Just if you're familiar with some of these tools and these tool names, just please click on it. Multiple answers are possible. And also a little hint, at the bottom, you have all of the above and more. So if you're a seasoned human-centered design veteran, You can also go for the answer very much at the bottom.
Okay, we have 64% voted. Good two-third majority. Ending the poll now.
Okay, excellent. Here are the results. Okay, everyone has done user interviews. Love it. So 80% of the responses here. Good half is familiar with business model mappings, business model canvases. That's also good to see. Empathy map, only 30%. I'm glad that we selected this tool to share with you next. User journeys, about half. That's also very good. So, no, excellent. So I think there is a good, strong basis that we can build on. But I'm also glad that we don't have everything at 100% because then we wouldn't need this workshop. So that's a very good point of orientation before we move into the next point. So going ahead in the presentation, let's have a look at tools and different mindsets that we want to share with you today that can help you over the next 2 weeks to develop possibly better or more human-centered solution for the Build Back Better challenge. So again, here you have the 5 or 6 different process steps with all the different names, depending on where you're coming from, what methodology you're applying. And here are now 6 different tools and mindsets that we would like to share with you today. So on the one hand, we'll tell you a little bit about how to frame a problem in HCD. We will have a look at empathy maps as a tool that allows you to really empathize with the users. We'll share a little bit around interviews and then have a look at synthesis, how to bring it all together. I'd like to share with you one of my favorite ideation tools, and then we'll share a little bit about how you could run some tests in the next 2 weeks. And of course, all of the above, there is a wealth of detailed design methods and flows and reports that you can read, but we'll just give you really the highlights of some of these selected tools in the next about 20 minutes. So let's have a look at framing. This is really all about defining your challenge in a stimulating way and creating your guiding star throughout your design process. So what is it? When it comes to framing, I would almost call it a mindset and not a tool. It's a mindset that builds on your curiosity and reframes your undertaking as a question. How might we? And you might have seen this several times in design briefs. It's a typical HCD jargon that people talk about, how might we? And phrasing your problem or your challenge actually in such a question, how might we, what if, imagine if, actually really helps you to convey to other people what you're trying to do. And in whatever you do during your design process, you can always come back to this question and you can ask yourself, what I'm doing in my project or in my undertaking at the moment, does it really still help me to answer this question? Or maybe throughout the design process, you've learned something new from your users. And you've learned that you're actually not asking the right questions. So you can go back to this step and actually change your question, right? So here, try to have formulate a good question that is stimulating and it doesn't include a solution yet. So let's give a little example. For this HCD workshop, it started off basically like, hey, Christoph, we need an HCD webinar for the Build Back Better challenge. And so this is a very functional statement, okay? We need HCD for this challenge. But then if you start to ask yourself some questions and if you add some HCD sparkles on top, so who is your audience? What do they need? What is the context? What are the constraints? What are we actually trying to achieve in the next 2 weeks? You might reformulate it as something like, how might we inspire and support UN innovators to submit great solutions to the Build Back Better challenge? And if you phrase it like this, it actually allows you to, let's say, design a better product. And hopefully the presentation that we have put together for you today is actually really able to respond to these, this how might we question that you can see here on the slide. And then also, Here, already at the framing stage, you can start to collect certain facts that you know about. So we only have 1 hour time for this webinar. Everything should be online. You would need to submit in the next 2 weeks. Probably some of the needs that you as innovators have. It has to be very practical. Our training today, there's limited time. It should help you and encourage you to dare to submit your ideas early in the public and so on and so forth, right? So you can always complement such a how might we question and the framing of your problem with additional facts or needs that help you to create the question in an appealing way. All right, then moving on, after you have framed your problem and you have a very compelling how might we question, let's have a look at the empathy map. And empathy maps are really a simple way or a simple tool to understand your user's perspective. You want to really dive into your user and understand what does your user say, what does your user do, think, and feel. And here again, you will get the slide deck, right? So that's why you have always a little bit more text on the slide so that if you read it by yourself afterwards, you don't only look at nice images, but you have some real content to look at. But yeah, so empathy maps are this tool that allows you to dive into your user's world, right? And you might have seen some innovation presentations where then typically the picture introduces meet blank, right? Meet Rachel, meet Thomas, meet Mohammed, right? This is the user, right? And this is basically a tool or methodology that's used very often to show that you really designed something around your user. So why do you need it? It helps you to really dive into your user's perspective and to be able to then define and design solutions that are relevant for your user. There are a few little tips and tricks. Usually try to give your user a name, and also then in the team when you work for your user, address this imaginary user by her or his name. That really helps. And then of course also if you have several users, you can make several empathy maps. And also if you have a solution that requires a lot of stakeholders or partners, you can even do that for, let's say, entities or the people that represent your partners and stakeholders. You can also do empathy maps for them to design more appealing solutions or offerings towards them. So let's have a look at an example again. An empathy map essentially is something very simple. You take a 2x2 matrix, you say, think, do, feel, right? And then you start by yourself or with your team. So if you try to imagine your, I said Rachel. Rachel is based somewhere in the world, is highly educated, has 5 years with the UN, is very busy at the moment, but full of energy to contribute to the Build Back Better challenge, right? And so let's dive into this world of Rachel, for whom we have designed this HCD workshop. And you can see just a bunch of posters, right? Rachel would say that she is eager to collaborate, but she has certain fears and things and a little bit of doubt. And so if you complete this exercise, it will really help you to then, when you enter ideation, to come up with some rich solutions. And then you can complement this typical empathy map about what Rachel sees, thinks, does, and feels by, if you try to imagine, what are the jobs or actions that Rachel takes related to the problem or challenge, right? So if you have something related to COVID Build Back Better, and this would be around education and online learning. So think about what are the steps that Rachel usually goes through. And I think a lot of you are familiar with customer journey mapping. And then along this journey, you can map out different pains and needs that the user would, for example, go through. You can also add this to this picture, right? And so then on one slide, you would have everything related to Rachel. That's the empathy maps. Simple tool, highly recommended, and a lot of fun to imagine to actually be your user. So let's have a look at user research and user research and interviews. And here, I would like to share with you basically my favorite video. I hope the audio works. Have to click play.
Christoph, the audio does actually not work. There's a setting on Zoom that where you can share your computer audio, or otherwise you can try to turn this all the way up.
Okay, share computer sound, I got it. Sorry, I forgot to switch it on. Let's go back to the beginning. There we go again. One more try.
We're told, don't ask your mum if your business idea is a good one. She'll just say yes. Because she loves you, of course. The mum test is a set of simple rules for crafting good questions that even your mum can't lie to you about. Let's have 2 conversations and see what we can learn. Mum, I've got a business idea. Can I tell you about it? Of course, dear. You like your iPad, right? Do you use it a lot? Yes. OK. So would you ever buy an app which was like a cookbook for your iPad? And it only costs £20. That's cheaper than your hardbacks on the shelf. Well, and you can share recipes with your friends. And there's an iPhone app which is your shopping list. And videos of that celebrity chef you love. Yes, dear. That sounds amazing. £20 is fine. Will it have pictures of the recipes? Yes, definitely. Thanks, Mum. I'm going to quit my job and put all my savings into my new startup. Won't you have some lasagna? That conversation led us down the garden path. The mum test is about talking to your customers about their life, not your idea. It's about discussing specifics in the past instead of generics or opinions about the future. It's about talking less and listening more. Let's do it again right this time. Hey, Mum, how's the new iPad? Oh, I love it. I use it every day. What do you usually do on it? Oh, you know, read the news, play Sudoku, catch up with my friends. What's the last thing you did on it? Well, Dad and I are off on holiday. I was looking where to stay. Did you use an app for that? No, I just used Google. What app should I use? How did you find out about the other apps you have? The Sunday paper has a section on the apps of the week. Makes sense. By the way, I saw a couple of new cookbooks on the shelf. Where did those come from? Oh, they're one of those things you just end up getting at Christmas. I think Doreen gave me that one. Haven't even opened it. As if I need another lasagna recipe at my age. Time to refine my idea. We discovered many insights in that conversation to help us adjust our idea. It just goes to show, if you can get useful business information from Mum, you can get it from anyone.
All right, thank you. I hope the audio and video quality was good. Really, this is one of my absolute favorite videos. In just 3 minutes, it shows of what is very often being done wrong in user interviews. And that's basically in the limited time that we have here, what I would like to pass on to you for inspiration. When you talk to your users, just make sure that you don't get desirable answers from your users, but that you really dive into their space, into their needs, and really try to uncover their choices and behaviors. And here, again, that's why it's also colored as a mindset. It's really about making sure that you're ready to learn something new, rather than you trying to fish for confirmation that the idea that you have is a good idea. So again, as you heard in the video, let the user talk. Don't try to pitch your idea. Try to understand the behavior and choices rather than asking what they think of your idea. And try to find out concrete examples of the past rather than asking hypothetical questions about the future. right? And then there are several different ways or tools you can do: user interviews, expert interviews, but you can also observe your user, right? Sometimes it's very interesting just going to the room where your colleagues would be, or maybe you can join them if it's about online collaboration. Maybe you can join them for 2 hours by screen sharing on how they actually work, so that you can just observe what the user actually really does. And then very often in user interviews, if you really want to get concrete answers, don't phrase it just as a question, but do some card games or allocation games where you give different options. You know, very often in focus interviews, that's also used, where you can see how people are really making choices in these interviews rather than giving hypothetical desired answers. Okay, so that was a little bit of inspiration about how to do user research and how to be really inquisitive and curious and ask 5 times why to really understand what's going on. So let's have a quick look at synthesis of bringing it all together, making sense of it all. And I actually, metaphorically speaking, I quite like the image that you see right here. You know, that's like from a detective movie, from a crime scene. So you are a detective in human-centered design. You're trying to collect all the different clues of the context of your user needs, and then you're trying to find the solution. You're trying to solve the case by coming up with the best answer. And while you're in the learn phase and before you enter the ideation phase, you try to bring it all together. And this image here of like all the different clues that you have collected while you were learning about your user and about the context is really, in HCD, it's no different than for, you know, old school detectives work. Just put it all out there and try to connect the dots. So concretely, what does that mean? During your learning, you probably want to collect as many different needs and facts and insights as you can. And typically what you would do, you would collect them as short sentences. You can put them on Post-its, and you actually try to put them all together, and you see which one of them is actually matched together, and you try to voice over, if you do it as a team exercise, of what these needs and facts actually have in common. And during this conversation, during playing with these insights, certain themes might emerge, right? And once you uncover some of these underlying themes related to your problem, you can use them to better understand what's going on, to improve your point of view, maybe go back to the framing, see if you have to revise your how might we question, because you've learned that it's actually going into a different direction, right? So here the synthesis, it's a rather fuzzy process. It's really about intuition to try to make sense in one way or another of everything that you have learned, and try to uncover some of these emerging themes related to the challenge that you're trying to solve. So after you have done that, you're ready to ideate, right? So you've really learned a lot about your users, and ideation is its own space in itself. But there's one simple tool that I would like to share with you that can help you to come up with a rich set of ideas. And it's called brain sketching, or sometimes it's called crazy eights as well. And it's quite simple. So first of all, why do you need specific ideation tools? Because, well, we all can always come up with great ideas, right? It's a creative process. It just sparks, it just happens. But sometimes if you do this as a group, people, the louder people, they cover up the more introvert, the more quiet people, right? And if you're in a team, you really want to surface everyone's ideas and everyone's creativity. That's where some tools come in handy. And it's actually super simple. All you need to do is take a piece of paper, fold it into 6 or into 8 little boxes. You allow yourself to just take 1 minute per box, and you prime yourself with your creative questions. So how might we solve this and that, or how might we help your user in whatever way your challenge is? And then here's the trick. You actually start to draw the solutions. This might feel awkward, but trust me, please try it. Even if you can't draw, it doesn't matter. No one will judge it, your drawing skills. But your brain simply works differently if you draw compared to actually writing text. And then you go from one field to the next field, and try to come up with 6 or 8 different ideas. And it's also okay to actually come up with crazy ideas. And here is what this can actually look like, right? It's really not about drawing skills, as you can tell, but here are, for example, different ways of solving a problem, right? You could organize an ideation party. Here the question in the background was how to get a team more innovative, right? You can have a tech wall for inspiration and so on and so forth, right? You can come up with a lot of different solutions to the questions of how to get a team more innovative, right? A simple training is not the only answer, for example. And working here with such a framework allows you to really surface a lot of different ideas. And then once you get the slide deck, have a look on the left side, a couple of bullet points on how you would have to actually ideate as a team, so that you shouldn't be judgmental. That should encourage wild ideas. There's no such thing as a bad idea. You've heard it probably many times before that when you talk with people about ideas, you use yes and not no but. And you know, there are a couple of ideation rules that probably also will help you to get you into the right direction. So brain sketching, great tool, try it out in a team, and really try to dare to be silly and funny, because usually when you laugh during an ideation exercise, it means that you're on to something, right? So explore especially these directions. And lastly, let's have a quick look at doing and testing, right? Let's recap. We have learned a lot about our users in the beginning, right? We've seen how to phrase a good question. We have understood how to do empathy maps and collect information about our users. We have heard a little bit on how to do user interviews in a way that you actually learn something. Once you've learned all of this, we try to make sense of everything we have learned, and then we try to enter ideation. And you have seen this one little tool on actually how to facilitate ideation in a team. Now, what we have is a long list of ideas, right? And now we have to start testing and doing to find out what actually works. And so what is this doing and testing all about? It's about simple ways to test if your idea works. And important, with next to no budget. I think especially in our professional context, we're used to writing a concept note, trying to get probably a 5-digit budget to test it and pilot it before we ask even for more. But typically in innovation, probably you can do some testing with $50, right? Probably something that most of you can cover through petty cash. So you just have to really challenge yourself. Is how can you design your testing in the most simple way possible? How does it work? Well, you identify your most critical assumptions. You know, what needs to be true for the idea that you have to actually work? And then you can try to build a pen and paper prototype and just show it to your users. Or now related to online working with COVID-19, probably you can build simple prototypes in Office 365, right? You can build forms, you can make some interactive slides, many different ways of how you just build whatever you want to build as part of the Build Back Better challenge. Without having to invest a lot of money into programmers. And then also there's another thing, but I'll show you on the next slide with the examples. That's in the top left corner. It's called the Wizard of Oz, or a man in a box, right? And you see the little circle on the image in the top left corner. And if you want to test whatever great algorithm that you want to come up with, well, be the algorithm, right? So you have someone actually sitting under the table and pretending to be the very smart technical solution that you want to devise, right? And so try to mimic the behavior of this algorithm just by yourself in order to learn what the user really likes. And of course, you can do a lot of mock-ups and wireframes. And as you have seen maybe in the hint on the previous slide, there are actually great tools out there. You just draw the app on pen and paper, you take a couple of pictures, and you basically have a working app, at least a click-through model for mockup and wireframes. If you want to create experiences, I mean, just try to create an experience offline. Now during COVID, it might be difficult, but I think some of you can already go to the office, right? And try to mimic that experience that you want to create through a later sophisticated platform. Or maybe just organize a Zoom call where you would do, where you do with the user in a workshop style, what you would want your future platform to do. as
Thank you, Christoph.
mentioned, go ahead. Yeah.
And if I may jump in here, because you just talked
Please
Zoom
go ahead.
calls, that's kind of a nice lead for me, because there's a question for Mayura and Kat. I'm wondering, how can you do human-centered design when everything has to be done online? I'm wondering if you can recommend some tools to help facilitate ideation in a virtual space. So you mentioned Zoom. Is there any other ones that you can think of that users could use?
There are many, but I'll give you just actually a very simple example where you don't have to learn new software. I believe actually just Google Slides or Office 365 PowerPoint, you can prepare a lot of smaller boxes that you can use as Post-its and people can just write on it. And basically any collaborative tool where users can provide input in parallel does the job. Of course, there are nicer solutions like Mural or Miro that look more professional and that give you somewhat more degrees of freedom. But now for the next 2 weeks, especially for the Build Back Better challenge, well, work with the tools that you already know. That's online slides, be it from Microsoft or from Google, right? Or maybe even online Excel or Sheets. And just set up a call, talk to each other and work together on a document and brainstorm and unleash your creativity. All right, so I hope that the essence about doing and testing is try to come up really with the cheapest way to find out if your basic idea works, right? And there are two different ways. Either you try to mimic the look and feel of your solution as close as you can with the experience, right? So if you want to have a matching app for, let's say, mentors and mentees, well, you could try the matching process in an actual online workshop where you invite 10 mentors and 10 mentees, and you just facilitate it in the same way that your app would do it in the future, right? So think creatively. There are ways of how you can test your idea with basically no budget. Just think hard enough and you'll find the ways. And then here's a little tip in the end. Testing is not just a phase. Your testing should never end, right? This is some of the mindset basics of HCD, always be playful, always keep on testing, try to figure out stuff, how it works and how you could do it better.